I have been bombarded by a letter from a member of the general public, which reads, "Dear Mr. so-called McKeegan, why have you not made a video predicting what cameras we will see from Canon, Nikon and Sony in 2022? Regards, yourself." So, to keep myself happy, that's what we're going to do now. Starting with Canon. Now, their recent releases have been, well, the hotly anticipated R3. Prior to that, we got the Why Even Bother M50 Mark I with a new badge, and the R5 and the R6 all back in 2020. Now, I know 2021 has been a crazy year, but it's the first year in about as long as I can remember that Canon have not brought a new DSLR to the market, not even a new Rebel. Now, this could be in part due to the ongoing chip shortages, but I think it's more a sign that Canon are steering away from DSLRs. So I would probably say that 2022 is unlikely to see anything more than maybe one new Rebel DSLR if we're lucky. I think their main focus now is all mirrorless. Now, on the mirrorless front, 2021 saw each of the three big manufacturers release high-end mirrorless models, and I'm fairly confident in saying that Canon are even now working on an R1. However, I'm not sure how likely it is that we'd see it in 2022. We might, but we might have to wait until 23 for that. It depends really on when they started working on it. I've speculated in the past that I think Canon were working on the R3, initially intending it to be the R1 to exceed the Sony A9 II, until Sony pulled the rug out from under their feet back in January when they dropped the A1, which would have then prompted Canon to demote the then R1 down to an R3 and start work on a brand new flagship. The key really is going to be whether they started working on the new R1 as soon as the A1 landed, or if they waited until the R3 was finished before starting development, because they wouldn't want to rush that development of such a high-end camera and risk releasing it half-cocked. So perhaps maybe towards the tail end of 2022 we might see it, or early to mid-23 for the R1 is my prediction. Now, obviously, all of this is just entirely speculation, but there is the ongoing silicon shortage, which is going to be a huge, unpredictable spanner in the works. I mean, some industry experts are saying that this shortage will continue beyond 2022 and into 23, which may impact what models manufacturers push forward with and what they end up delaying. I mean, there have been rumours of Canon releasing a very budget full frame coming to the market with a sub $1,000 price tag, as well as rumours of replacements for the R and the RP, although perhaps the RP replacement is the sub 1,000 camera. There's also rumours of an R5C coming in early 2022, although this could be like the 1DX to the 1DC. Same basic hardware as the R5, but with a few minor tweaks and a laughably higher price tag. Now, I wonder, however, if this ongoing silicon shortage is going to impede those lower-end full-frame models from being released, as a shortage of silicon is probably going to drive up the cost of sensors and processors, and that's going to make a more noticeable markup on the price of budget cameras rather than higher-end cameras. And makes me suspect that Canon might favour an APS-C RF model over a full frame, given that they can produce more APS-C sensors for any given amount of silicon than they can with a full frame sensor. And again, due to said shortages, I will predict most likely any APS-C camera would be something like an R7. I mean, Canon have not been giving enough focus to their M series for forever, which suggests it's not their long-term focus for APS-C, but rather a separate line with a different customer base than RF in mind. But there are plenty of people out there who want an RF APS-C camera for the extra crop and the faster performance for similar money versus full frame. I mean, we could easily see an APS-C RF camera with speeds that rival the R3 for a price point closer to the R6. And again, with the silicon shortage driving up prices, it would be easier to cover that markup in a more expensive model than a cheaper one. Plus, the RF lens lineup is more geared to higher end models at the moment than budget ones. So my predictions from Canon are R7, R5C, and maybe even an R1. Now, I think 2022 could actually be a quiet year for Nikon cameras. 2021 saw the ZF-C, which is fundamentally a retro Z50, and then they had the Z9 land with one hell of a splash. But Nikon's full-frame lineup seems pretty solid for 2022. They've got the newly arrived flagship, they've got the Z7 II, the Z6 II, and the Z5, all of which have been released within the past 18 months and are all still holding up pretty well compared to the competition. Now, logic would say if they're going to replace any of these, it would most likely be the Z5 because that's the oldest of the lot. However, I suspect maybe Nikon are going to focus more on also growing their APS-C lineup. I mean, they've already made the jump into APS-C with the Z mount. They've committed to it when they launched the Z50. But that camera came out over 2 years ago now, and their APS-C lens lineup is still somewhat lacking as well. So perhaps we'll see a replacement for the Z50, or they'll expand their range of cameras with maybe a higher end model, maybe even a lower end model, something to try and expand their consumer base a bit. However, maybe Nikon are going to focus more on lenses for 2022 rather than bodies, since I was looking back on their lens roadmaps, and there've been a lot of lenses that they've said are in the works and are planned, which either haven't showed up yet or they've announced have been delayed. So I wonder if they might target more of their resources to catching up on the lenses instead. And finally, Sony. I mean, 2021 kicked off with Sony basically jumping out of a bush and headbutting the competition in the groin with the release of the A1. I mean, it took everyone by surprise, as did their later releases of the A variants of the R3 and R4, although that was more of a surprise of why did you even bother? We later then saw the release of the ZV-E10 and the very polarizing A7 IV. Now, I don't actually expect to see much in the way of full frame from Sony in 2022. I mean, the A7 IV is fresh out of the gate, the A7C and the A7S III are barely a year old. The A7R4 is now getting on to 2.5 years old, however, there's nothing on the market even now that truly rivals it, so I'm not convinced that that's going to be a top priority for Sony to replace. I think if we're likely to see any full-frame camera get an update, it would be the A9 II in response to the R3. I mean, there have been rumours of an entry-level full-frame such as something like an A5, but again, with the chip shortages at the moment, I'm not sure if this would be the case or not. I again suspect 2022 could be more APS-C focused. I mean, yes, they've released the ZV-E10 this year, but that's more focused heavily at video. The current A6000 series were all launched back across 2019. I mean, so was the A7R4, but unlike the A7R4, the A6000s are actually under threat from the competitors. So could 2022 finally be the year that we see the long speculated A7000? God knows. With the way the world's going at the minute, it's anyone's guess. I mean, we could just as easily see a flurry of new camera bodies that were supposed to be released in 21, but just got pushed back, or we could see one of the manufacturers announce that they're leaving the camera market altogether and starting making tartan slippers. Neither would frankly surprise me at the moment. But what are your thoughts on what 2022 will bring? Let me know in the comments down below. While you're down there, please consider supporting the channel if you haven't already done so by clicking the like button, the subscribe button, the bell icon. Just randomly whack everything, and then hopefully we'll see you in the next video.